And we are joined by the great Jonathan Feigen of the Houston Chronicle. Jonathan, how you doing?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing all right. The great always surprises you. We've done so many of these, and it always seems to surprise you.
Yes, it does. Well, I don't like introduce myself like that, and so no. Maybe I should. That would be cool, but
I
no, I
I
don't.
think you have the license to, man. Like I think you have a lot of respect among journalists, especially in the basketball community. Like I think no one's gonna blink an eye if you say that.
Well, what's interesting? Thank you. It's kind of you to say. I don't think of myself, of course, not that way. But I will say, Mark Murphy, or the great Mark Murphy of the Boston Herald, announced he's retiring. And so now for a lot of years, I don't know if he was on the beat or the backup or co-beat but he certainly goes back to the Larry Bird era of the Celtics as a beat guy. So now I'm not sure, but I think I'm the second most tenured beat guy in the NBA.
Who's got you
Uh,
beat?
Ira Winderman, who
Okay, yeah,
has
makes sense.
covered the Miami Heat since there have been Miami Heat, and so he's getting younger all the time. So good for Ira, and but I might be wrong about that. But in terms of continued time on one beat, I'm pretty sure. And in my case, as you know, that's because I love it. I ended up on a beat that I love covering. To me, there's every day in the arena is a good day, and so uh, that's where I know how lucky I am.
Right. It's certainly been one of the most interesting beats in the NBA. It's not like Charlotte or something. It's like actual, there's like a story that's there to cover all the time, whether they're good or bad. And they've seldom been bad, which is only added to the intrigue. Um,
Well, when I got on the beat in 1998, Fran Blindberry, who was a columnist, great columnist at the Chronicle for many years, told me about it. We were doing a radio show. He was doing it every day. I was doing Monday mornings and Friday afternoons. And he told me about it and said that I was going to succeed Eddie Sefko. Eddie decided to go cover golf. He covered 5 years of the Tiger reign. And Fran's words were, and the Rockets, they'll never be the Atlanta Hawks. They'll do everything. I don't know why he picked the Hawks. I don't remember what they were doing in the late '90s, but they'll always go for it. They don't settle for the middle, and they've had so many changes in the 20-something years since then. But that's still true. They're never just sort of in the middle and okay with that and make the playoffs and sell some tickets. They're willing to scrape the bottom as a way to get to the top, but they do at least try. Of course, I went about 17 years where they never won a playoff series, but they do dare greatly.
and even when they were in the middle for like 3 years there for a second. They weren't really in the middle because unlike those other middle teams, they were preparing to try to get into the top, slowly but slowly churning assets in the background, trying to eventually, obviously, lead to the James Harden trade.
I was thinking about that today. I was driving, and I thought, remember, what was it, about 4 years ago? The Rockets offered 4 first-round picks for Jimmy Butler,
Yeah.
and there was a gasp, gasp around the basketball community. Now it's like, only four. There's no pick swaps attached. Just anybody who gets traded. Well, not anybody, but an all-star gets traded. It's got to be. We're going to load up with a load of picks to get them.
Yeah, and it almost seems like Houston knew for the longest time what the value of these star players were, and they were prepared to pay for that value because they knew like what they're currently being traded for is under market value. Now we've gotten to a point where perhaps it's tipping to maybe over market value in some cases, not all of them, but it's self-corrected, I think. And part of that it's on Daryl. I think I'm going to give Daryl credit to part of that because he definitely, you know, had an idea of mind of what a star player should be worth market wise. and that's kind of come to fruition in a lot of cases.
That and, a former Rockets front office guy under Darryl, although he was here before Darryl, Sam Hinkie doing the other end of it, which was, look, if you're going to rebuild, go for it. Collect as many picks as you could possibly get, because that gives you the best chance of one of those picks panning out to be, in this case, Joel Embiid. They're not all going to be him. There'll be a Michael Carter-Williams in there, who was a Rookie of the Year. But he's not going to be the kind of guy who changes your life. And now you look at the Rockets, Thunder, Jazz, the thinking has become, get as many unprotected picks as possible, because that gives you the best chance. As many lottery tickets as you can get is a better chance of winning the lottery.
And that's kind of where I wanted to start the show, because the last time you were on, Kevin Durant, I believe, had requested his trade, or was very close to requesting his trade. It was going to happen a few days later. If not, it might have already happened. And now that's changed. He's staying in Brooklyn. How does that change the way you think of the Brooklyn picks that Houston owns?
Well, it kind of goes back to what they were, that they're down the road, have to see what they become so far out. Because this year, or the next draft, the Rockets don't have a Brooklyn pick. It's subsequent. This is sort of like go to marriage counseling, try and give it one more shot. I don't know that this is love that's built to last forever. And so we'll see what happens.
What a way of phrasing that.
Those two crazy kids make it, I don't know. Yeah. And then that becomes the question, if, okay, we gave it a shot and we got blown out in the first round again, and I asked for a trade, you didn't give it to me or couldn't get it, whatever. I came back now, deliver. Not to mention, if they flame out, does Kyrie leave? It's hard to predict any of this because Durant has never made it clear why he wanted out. I've heard some things, but whatever it is, if they flame out again, and this time it really does fall apart, well, that's why the Rockets went for as many, going back to that metaphor, as many lottery tickets as they can get. And it could flame out.
Yeah.
Although, for the short term, they have a better chance of being great than if they came up with some sort of trade involving Durant. So for now, they could also be great.
I'm glad you're on my side with this, because I was thinking the same thing. In fact, I wrote it when Durant requested the trade. I'm like, this is the highest point in value for those Brooklyn picks. When Kevin Durant gets traded, those picks are going to sink in value because the Nets are formulating their Kevin Durant trade with the idea in mind that they know that they have these picks out going to Houston. So they're going to try to remain good, or they're going to try to restock their draft covered. Either way, they're never going to truly bottom out in the same way had they stuck together and perhaps aged out or injuried out. The possibility of that happening that exists right now, that would not exist if they traded Durant and gotten younger.
Yeah, well, then there's another way to look at it. You're going to like this, and I was going to hold this, but I'll write it one day if Durant asks out again. Or the best thing that could happen for the Rockets is if he stays, which now it appears he is, they bomb out, the Nets decide to trade him next summer. I could do my Bryant Windhorst thing since we're on camera. Where does it make most sense for the Nets to trade him? There's only one team that can acquire Kevin Durant and give the Nets the picks of the team that lost. Yeah, I like that too. If I could throw out the Kevin Durant trade, you could throw out bringing back James Harden. But you know what? If he's not sensational this year, and therefore would come back, does he have enough left in the? Do you start worrying he has enough left in the tank? And if he's so good that you don't worry about that, well, then doesn't he stay there?
I see. I'm starting to realize that I'm thinking about James Harden in an entirely different way than other basketball writers are. In that I think that James Harden's going to be fine. Like I think he's going to be
I do
a
too.
top 10 player again next year. And like
I
there's
kind
like
of do too.
right, and like when other people talk about him, it's like there seems to be a doubt there, and it feels so wrong to be so confident in it when you looked at how bad he looked last year. But a lot of it was like I just believe he was hurt. Fundamentally, I believe he was playing hurt, like through a lot of pain with those hamstrings, and
Yeah.
nobody gave him the time to recover that they seem to give to like other players that get hurt with these injuries. Like we always say, hamstrings are tricky. They take time. They take time. But when players get hurt, we can't seem to pull ourselves back and say that again. Like hamstrings are tricky. They take time. Like Chris Paul when he was in Houston, right? Tears his hamstring in the conference finals, has a pretty off year the following year. And then the next year, I don't think it was vegan diet Chris Paul. I think it was, oh, my hamstring is good now, Chris Paul. Right? Like I think it takes guys time to recover from these injuries. So I mean, maybe I'm a little deluded in thinking that James Harden's going to be fine, but that's why it never even comes to mind like, oh, he's not going to be fine. So what then? Maybe that's
Well,
just me.
I agree with you. I think he's going to be much more of James Harden for a combination of the reasons you're explaining. The Chris Paul example, I don't know that he or James were in pain the year after it, but they didn't have the pop. Chris Paul couldn't
Right.
beat anybody off the dribble that year, and he doesn't rely on that. So people put that aside, but he definitely has been moving better ever since because he did change his diet and his workout regimen and training regimen. James Harden, okay, he might probably is still eating hamburgers or whatever else I don't know what he actually I do know what he likes, and he did eat red meat, and I bet he still is. But I'm sure he is working and training to be in much better shape than what he was last year when he could not train that way. And people have always overlooked James Harden trains hard. Guys would get traded here and they would tell you, I thought he was just a partier. His workouts are unreal. Even guys who are amazing athletes, Russell Westbrook would watch him after games, where Harden would do stuff after games and would do stuff. He'd do the exact same thing after every game. Harden does not change his routine for anything. And they're just Austin Rivers told me one time he does heavy lifts. Guys go in the weight room and they talk and they sit at this and they walk to here, unless the strength coach is right there on him. He goes in there and he's working and it's heavy lifts. I don't think he was able to do the kind of training that he likes to do, that he has over the years often, not always, but often done. Now I believe he is. So as with Chris Paul, I believe the second year after the hamstring injury, he is going to look much more like it. But then that brings back to we'll throw it out there because it's off-season thing, is but if he's that good, don't the Sixers make a run? Don't they become contenders? And if that's the case, doesn't he stick around Philadelphia?
Well, if he's that good, doesn't he want a better contract than what he's currently signed to?
Yeah, but they'll get him. They can do it.
Yeah, they can do that, but he would opt out, right? It's like the optionality to change teams still remains. Like it's not like he's gonna ever, like if he has that amazing year that we're theorizing, that optionality will always be there, right? And that's all I'm saying is that optionality. Like we're talking about these free agent classes like they're crap. The next two, I wouldn't say that so quickly. I wouldn't say it so quickly because I just think that guy is good enough to be the best player in a free agency class and headline a free agency class. And you can't say that about all but like 5 or 6 players in the NBA. So,
I don't know
that's
if
all I'm
he's
saying.
coming here to be Kevin Porter Jr.'s backup. Maybe you're right.
Yeah. Um so last time you were on the show, you were also here pre-draft. And I figure we can go there. I think it's pretty clear the Rockets were expecting for Paolo Banchero to be the guy that falls to them at number 3. Like all the pre-draft reporting indicated that Orlando was taking Jabari and that Oklahoma City was taking Chet, leaving the Rockets with Paolo. But as everyone knows now, that's not what happened. Orlando took Paolo, OKC held on to Chet, and the Rockets ended up with Jabari. I have 2 questions. One, were you ever able to ascertain how the top of their draft board was ordered? I asked you that last time. I know it was pretty unclear at the time.
Well, no, they didn't do it. They didn't do like way back when in the day. Rudy Tomjanovich once asked, "Okay, who do we take first? If we had the first pick, who would we take?" And they didn't do the real work, but the guys in the room said, we'd probably take Eddie Griffin. And then Eddie Griffin was there and they made a deal and they got him, actually. But that's who they actually said. Well, but they didn't do the work because they didn't. I mean, they did the work to know where they'd want him if they got him where they did, of course, but not at the first pick because they weren't anywhere near that. Well, the Rockets, they made sure they checked the boxes to know they'd be happy with all 3 guys. But they didn't get as much medical information on Chet Holmgren as they would have had they held the first pick or the second pick, but certainly not the first pick. But they would have been okay if he was third. I think they'd have been okay with that. But they didn't say, okay, who would we pick first if we were picking first? Because they were third, and they knew they were happy with any of the 3. Now they also believed until that afternoon that it was going to be Paolo, and he was good with that, and he believed that. I mean that it would have been terrific in a lot of ways. This can also be terrific in different ways, but they were very happy with what they were going to get. So they didn't sit there and think, okay, but what would we do if we went first? They never actually really broke it down that way.
So, do you think if they had gotten the medical information on Chet, they would have entertained the idea of moving up to number 1
So they were
to take him specifically, not to move up in general?
Well, I think they were very happy with Paolo to where they would not have done that. Although they did put feelers out about that. That never went anywhere. And that's when they kind of got the idea, okay, Orlando's picking first. They reached a point where they were very happy with what they thought was going to happen. And then it didn't. And you could see why. You and I talked about that. There was a stretch where people were down on Paolo Banchero, and I never really understood it.
Yeah, never understood it. I still don't understand it looking back on it. Like it honestly makes me angry looking back on it because the criticisms were so damn stupid. It was basically, oh, he has a weakness. That was the criticism. Like if you were to dumb it down to one sentence, that was what it was. That was the criticism on him. And for everybody else, oh, we can ignore these weaknesses because we like these strengths so much more that we're able to ignore it. Like right, like with Jabari with ball handling or with Chet with the weight. It's like, oh, yeah, but we're fine with it. And for some reason with Paolo, it dogged him down to such a point that no one was able to ever conceive of him as the number 1 overall pick up until the last few weeks where people actually started to entertain it. Which is like, yes, of course you should have always entertained it, right? And not to say that the GM has never entertained it, but then I'm talking about media circles, that was never an entertainable number one pick until the last couple of weeks, and it was really infuriating to read all that stuff. But that's over with. The Rockets drafted Jabari. So my second question is, how do the Rockets feel about Jabari in general? Like he certainly seems to be a great on paper fit for their roster, but ceiling wise, how good do they think he can be?
Well, I don't know that I've asked or they've said exactly. In other words, I don't know that they've worded it that way. I do know all 3 guys. So I did ask at one point, and I got a feel for the chance of any of those 3 guys to be the MVP candidate type of guy is not as high as it was the year before with what they got, with Jalen Green, or maybe, I don't know, but maybe what they thought of Cade. Yes, I do know. Cade Cunningham or Jalen Green, the chances, the odds of it are not great. It's not great for any human walking around to be the kind of guy who changes your life. Even, maybe LeBron was. Who knows? Maybe Victor Wembanyama is. But generally, the odds aren't great that anybody you're drafting is going to be that, all-time great type. But the chances were better a year ago. But these guys have a chance, whatever percentage you put on it. Paolo's physical attributes, he's a really big man to do what he does physically, the way he can move, the way his touch and feel and vision, his vision's fantastic. To be that big and to be, a point power forward or center, he can be that. Chet obviously has his physical advantage, his incredible length, the way he can move at that length. With Jabari, he has ridiculous potential defensively. He can be so good defensively. To be a knockdown shooter, and really, he is a tall, long guy. And that really hit the Rockets as they looked at him as, man, he's got great length. That he's not, it's serviceable length. In other words, it's not just tall, but he doesn't play that way. No, he's got great length. And his great attribute of being a ridiculous defensive player, potentially, he has a chance to be very special. But if you want to say what the ceiling is, it's too soon to really know. It's just the chances of getting to the greatness ceiling is what they kind of talk about.
Yeah, so their second pick, the guy they took at number 17. Everything you heard about Tari Eason going into the draft was that he was this great athletic defender and he was an analytics darling. You kept on hearing that over and over again. And it's kind of hilarious. Like for the second year in a row, the Rockets have taken the analytics darling midway through the draft. Last year with Şengün and this year with Eason. So two questions here again. How deeply do analytics still play a role in Houston's decision making now that Daryl's gone? Because I think we all know that the number 2 guy in that front office, Eli Wittes, comes from an analytics background. But the main thing that we know about Rafael is that he is this deal-making guy with a law background, right? So presumably very good with the CBA and presumably very good at making trades. And as far as his fascination with numbers, I don't really know much about that, right? Second question. So Woj reported on draft night that they considered Eason to be the best defender in the draft and that they liked his ability to switch and play with aggression. Does that line up with what you heard?
Yeah, very much that they like, especially the last thing you said, ability to switch and play with aggression. And the way they were wording it is to make plays defensively. That, he's in position and he's always going to compete, and therefore the guy he's matched up against will more often miss than if that guy was against someone else. No, he's also going to get deflections. He's going to get loose balls. He's going to block shots. He's going to get out of position and then be so quick and play so hard that he makes up for it anyway. He has potential to be all over the place in a good way. He's sort of like the cornerback who intentionally lays off the receiver to get the quarterback to throw there, and then has such incredible closing speed that he makes a play. Tari Eason makes plays defensively, and that's what they really liked about him. He also, partly because of that, he can be a little foul prone, and he has to develop his way out of that. But defensively, they really like the potential. He can finish. He plays really hard, and which also Jabari Smith, he competes. Jabari Smith defensively, it's like, this is all that matters to me. And Tari's got some of that too. And they also like the idea that's the way the league plays now, especially in the postseason. And it sounds like, really? You're talking about the team that had the worst record in the league the last 2 years, but eventually they would like to be in the postseason. And to be able to switch as many positions as possible is huge in the postseason, where teams, more than style of basketball, is force a switch, and then attack the favorable matchup. Go at the guy you're choosing to. The Rockets like the idea, yeah, we're going to switch everything anyway. That's what we want to do. And you're not going to find a weak link to attack, they hope, ideally. And if those two guys eventually are playing major minutes, I don't know which one you call the 4, which one you call the 3. I don't know that it, or maybe even a 5 in a lot of lineups. I don't know that it matters, but they look like they can switch like crazy and really compete. It's sort of a different version. Cleveland last year had 2 big men on the court at once. One was a very unusually good defensive rookie. Well, they have a chance of having 2 really good front court defensive players who are both rookies. And then that's one more thing I'll add to that is that all that said, really hard to rely on rookies to carry your defense, to lead your defense. It probably not a real good idea, but that's what they envision down the road.
Maybe I missed it. Did you answer that first question?
Well, you got to tell me what it was again.
Okay, no problem. I asked, how deeply do analytics still play a role?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Rafael definitely very. I don't want to say wedded to analytics, in that he does scout and he's big on video scouting. That's more his thing. That he likes to study the video more than probably in person. But he absolutely uses the analytics. He'll dive deep into it. He'll want a lot of information. Eli does come with that background, but he is also kind of their cap guy in a lot of ways. There's not a cap guy in the way they're set up, but he's very much that. He's not just a numbers cruncher on the analytics at all. And they still have their big analytics team of people, the big department. But no, Rafael definitely uses it all. And I think he probably would use the same sort of philosophy that Daryl used, where I asked Daryl once, because they had like 3 years in a row, they drafted a guy that the analytics did not. The reason the guy slipped is because the analytics weren't there, and Daryl drafted him. And he said, well, it's because the scouting loved him. And I said, well, what happens then if the scouting, the eyes on the player, traditional scouting says grab him, but the numbers say don't, what do you do? And he said, we do deeper analytics till we find out what the truth really is. And we go deeper and deeper with the analytics. And I think that probably would apply to Rafael as well. Okay, maybe the first look on the numbers didn't pan out, but there's a reason the eye test did, so let's keep looking, dig deeper, keep digging deeper. I would think he would agree with what Daryl said that day.
Yeah, it's interesting. I kind of look at Josh Christopher as a very much like a analytics versus eye test guy, because from the eye test, like Josh Christopher, like plays with such a swagger and brings such an energy to the team, and then you look at the numbers and it's like, yeah, I feel like I must have inputted the wrong guy's name, and like it's part of the reason why I was like, oh, I'm surprised they took him at 24. It seems like a pretty high that this organization would take him at. But you watch him play again, it's totally different. But it is interesting to see, like they haven't really abandoned like their core principles as an organization, even though they've had so much turnover. Not only just from the top, like throughout the front office, they've had a lot of people get hired away to other organizations, and they still seem to have that deep philosophy in with the advanced metrics, and obviously. They seem reliant on fun film as well.
Yeah, well, and they're out there as well, and they have eyes on players. I'm sure the Ed Pinkney, Chuck Hayes, Matt Bullard expense reports would indicate that they're on the road an awful lot. So they're out on the road as well. And that was the other thing. It was always Daryl was proud to be referred to as the analytics guy, and he had no problem with that. But he was on the road constantly. He almost more than any other GM, he actually did scouting all over. He went to Europe. And I asked him about that once, where your reputation is you're the analytics guy, and yet you're in the gym. And he said, I thought when I first started, I thought every GM was that way because that's how Danny Ainge was. And so I thought, that's how you do it. And so that's how I did it. And now that's how I like to do it. That's how I work. And Rafael was also out there, as they all are, but he does especially more and more and more as you get to the draft. He relies very heavily on video. And he's been open about that too, that, these individual workouts where you see the guy for an hour and a half, I'm supposed to put more weight in an hour and a half than I did in 33 games of video. Those are probably more valuable than the hour and a half or the 20-minute or however long it is sit down that they do in Chicago or when they have them in their own facility, which obviously is a lot more than 20 minutes. But, I know, for example, though, the Tari Eason one was in Chicago. And I actually talked to Tari Eason in Chicago the day he met with the Rockets. And Rafael was not part of that group that did that initial interview session with a player they ended up taking. Now, eventually, Rafael, of course, did have his interview with him. But, I think Tari was real high on the Rockets, and the Rockets were real high on him from Chicago on.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy, to believe how many good defenders were in this draft, and they consider him to be one of the best. Hell, even the guy they drafted is considered to have elite defensive upside. I guess that just speaks to the kind of defensive, talent that was in this draft.
Yeah, and it's a good way to build, especially when, their defense didn't end up as bad as it was overall last year, but overall they were last defensively. There's nothing they need to improve. Maybe I don't think there is anything they need to improve more desperately than defense. Maybe you can make an argument taking care of the ball, which is also a big problem of their defense. They took care of the ball so horribly that their defense was at a disadvantage most possessions. But those two things, nothing they need to improve more. So obviously picking a couple guys with terrific defensive potential makes a lot of sense, even if you're not drafting for need or based on your own shortcomings at any one moment.
So the Ty Washington thing is interesting because I'm not sure how you felt about it. I didn't think that Houston got a good return on the initial Christian Wood trade. And then they turned that first round pick into another first round pick in 2 seconds. And I'm like, okay, this is much better than what they seem to be getting before. And what made it even better is I thought Ty Washington should have been higher than where he was selected. I thought he was listen, he wasn't one of my favorite players, but 26, it just seemed way too low. I don't know why he fell that low, considering how weak the point guard talent was in that draft, and how capable he seemed to be, especially when he got right. He was dealing with injuries that entire college season, and he still played pretty well, especially shooting the three ball, which a lot of people were concerned with, and he shot 35% from three. So I like that pick, honestly, and I was surprised. Did you ever find out why he seemed to fall so far on draft night?
No,
I saw some projections of him in the lottery.
Yeah, I saw a few there. Actually, a lot of people put him with the Rockets in the middle.
17.
Yeah,
Right.
at 17. And but I did not ever really ask. I didn't really look, okay, why did he fall to where he did? But obviously, great value, a guy who was evaluated pretty universally as worthy of a pick 10 spots at least earlier. It's pretty easy to see he has potential to be a really good rotation player. And so you get him late. And I can understand why you'd feel like you traded Christian Wood for a late first-round pick. Right. That's the best you could do because the players they got really aren't in their long-range plans. And so, but it worked out, So sometimes things do. And it worked out because they got a guy. they had traded Christian Wood for the 18th pick or the 16th pick and took Ty Washington, you'd say, okay, good job. So it kind of worked out anyway. And you got a couple future second rounders.
If Ty hadn't fallen, or if they hadn't completed that deal to move down and get those seconds, I would still be pretty negative on that trade. Now I feel like they got like median return on that Christian Wood deal. Still think they should have traded him earlier, but that's besides the point.
Well, there's also a very good chance they couldn't then get even what they did or get more than what they did. So they kept waiting.
It depends on how early they started looking for trades.
Well, yeah, even like before last season even started.
Yeah, that's when I thought about Houston. Should probably move Wood at some point, and I was like surprised that they didn't really think about it seemingly until last year's trade deadline.
Yeah, I don't know whether they could have done better. I would think they could have. His numbers are always good, but again, I hate to word it this way because it sounds like blaming Christian Wood for the way the team was in his 2 years, which is of course ridiculous. You can't blame him, but he wasn't the solution either, and maybe that's a lot to expect. But well, you're the center of the team with the worst defense in the league. He definitely was not the solution, and it makes sense to try something else, especially as he goes into his last season under contract. You can't have a great deal of confidence he would have become their long-term answer there. And so, but you get him at a good price, which they certainly did. His contract was fine. Do you take another look, a second look for a second season? Especially, people forget everything collapsed not when James Harden was traded, but when Christian Wood got hurt. They had won, I believe it was 7 of 8 before he wrecked his ankle in Memphis that day, and then they lose 20 straight. And so that's when it fell apart. There was a time where it was working.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of the Christian Wood trade, and you mentioned training camp, the Rockets are sitting at 18 players on the roster right now. Can I assume they haven't cut any of these Dallas guys yet because they don't have to, and it's always helpful to have extra bodies in training camp? Or could they be holding out on possible trades where they could consolidate some of these contracts to get a more sizable salary?
Well, they could do that now. They've reached that point where it's long enough since the Dallas trade where you can do that. No, what you said is exactly why they're holding on. Why just release them? They have no need. There's nothing happening in early September where we need the roster spots. So, yes, that's why. Although Boban, as you know, and pretty clear, they'd like him on the roster. There's situations where the rebounding is just falling apart. Just go out there, get the rebounds. Where offensively settle us down. Let's throw it into Boban. He can produce. Boban can't be really good for long minutes, but he produces. And so they like the idea of having him on the roster. But generally, no, those guys are on the roster because why not? Maybe something comes up and they could use the salary. I would not expect them to be on the opening night roster, except for Boban.
Is it safe to assume that Bruno Fernando is going to be one of their two-ways?
Yeah, a very good chance, unless things shake out enough to where he gets a standard contract. I like him. I'd like to. I think he's worth a longer look, too. Obviously, Şengün is the starter. They want major minutes out of him. Boban is sort of a specialist in certain situations. They absolutely still intend to use the small lineups, as these days everybody does. They even have a few more small lineups than they used to. They could even go, it's a way to increase Jabari Smith and Tari Eason's minutes, is using them in the small lineups, using them with Jayshawn Tate, regardless of who you call the center in that group. Uh, no, they're not looking to add another center besides that, I don't think. And as you said, they do have a two-way if they needed another center on the team who, I mean, he's not signed to a two-way contract. It's an Exhibit 10, I believe. But,
Right.
obviously that could be converted to a two-way, and a very good chance that's what Bruno Fernando's role becomes.
So you mentioned the big rotation. Kelly Iko, the Athletic, reported earlier this summer that KJ Martin had requested a trade out of Houston. Let me start here. I can see why KJ may be concerned about his playing time and getting lost in the shuffle, considering the Rockets just drafted two forwards in the first round and retained Jayshawn Tate. But I have no idea like what his strategy is here. Like it's not like he's a star player that's a pending free agent and I can threaten to leave the franchise like and hold it over everybody. This is a guy who was like kind of a nice little surprise in the second round and is on a rookie scale contract. He has absolutely no leverage. And because this information got out, the Rockets have lost some leverage in every trade involving KJ because every team now knows he wants out. That makes him less likely to get traded. So this request and subsequent leak of the request makes no sense to me. I don't understand the strategy here. How do you think the Rockets manage the situation?
Well, you're not getting much for him anyway. Whether it got out or not out, whether he wants out or doesn't, you're not getting much. He was a late second round pick who's gotten backup minutes with the worst team in the league for 2 years. You're not getting much. If you're getting anything, you get a protected second round pick. So it doesn't matter what gets out. I understand why he would feel like he can get lost in the shuffle when they draft two guys who basically play his position in the first round.
And they retain Jayshawn Tate.
Yeah, Smith and well, no, they already had Jason. Yeah, you're keeping him. They love him, and so I mean, he's back and playing regular minutes. He's playing starters minutes, and so you're right. It's very easy for KJ to be lost in the shuffle. Is a good way to put it. It'd be interesting to see. He has improved in some ways, and if he's a young guy and he has some physical tools, it'd be interesting to see if he continues to improve. It doesn't hurt the Rockets to just hang on to him and look at him because it's not, they don't feel pressure to get what they can at the best time. You're not getting much. And as we have seen in many ways with many players, general managers don't change dramatically their evaluation. It's not like it's Kawhi Leonard taking 15th who becomes, finals MVP Kawhi Leonard. Okay, I guess we were wrong on him. They're a little slow to change their evaluation dramatically. And I don't think he's at that point yet. Maybe, obviously, I think you look at him and you think, well, that's a lot better than a guy taking 55th. But that doesn't mean general managers are going to, make you an offer you can't refuse for a guy that they were happy to not take for so many picks.
Yeah, the only way I could see him getting traded at this point would be one of those consolidation trades that we talked about earlier. Mm-hmm. Like him being kind of a sweetener for another trade, or him being a part of a massive swath of contracts headed somewhere for a significant piece of salary. That kind of trade. I can't see it being a 1-for-1 trade. Like I don't think he's that kind of player. I think if I don't think there's any interest on Houston's side in acquiring like a second round pick or whatever he nets back. I don't see it and that's why the request was so odd to me. That's why leaking it was again even more odd because it's you're not getting anything out of the leak. All of it was just odd. Just an odd free agent story all around.
Well, yeah, I think you're right that if he would be part of a package where he has some value if he's on the right team in the right situation, and you can feel like, okay, he can be productive for us. I could see him being included in a deal. But you get this time of year where everybody's roster has more players on it than you can bring into the season. You're worried about how do we cut guys? Do we add another guy that we have to find out what he is, what he can be for us? It's a tough time now to start adding guys who aren't immediately in your rotation, or you're not real clear on where he fits. Everybody has a lot of those. But I do think he can be productive. In the right situation, he can be very productive. It'll be interesting to see also is what he can be defensively if he gets minutes, regardless of where that is, because he did improve defensively in his second year, where he didn't block anywhere near as many shots. He didn't have the spectacular block the 7-2 guy as often. But part of that was because he was positioned so much more regularly. He wasn't coming from nowhere so often. He was better defensively. He shot better as a catch and shoot three. It'll be interesting to see if he makes the next steps, if he gets the minutes to show that.
Yeah, again, I like KJ. It's just like this whole story came out of nowhere for me, and I was just like, I don't understand it. It was weird. It's just a weird story all around. So let's end on this. What is the biggest story for the Rockets in your opinion heading into training camp?
Well, do you mean what will be for the year, or just at training camp?
For the year, or you can
Jalen Green.
Camp if you have something specific.
Well, if it's for the season, it's Jalen Green. Is Jalen Green? Not he's more important than everybody because he has potential to be special. He really does. He works hard. He's ambitious as can be. He's so talented. He has a chance to be really special. So the biggest story of the season, from where we sit now, looking ahead to the season, I think it's Jalen Green, and he's in his second year. So even though he's 20, he's really young, and he's in his second year, but that's at least more than Jabari Smith at 19 in his first year. To where if Jabari Smith needs more years, or we don't know yet, that's no big deal. Or if he's great right away or shows great potential right away, that's terrific too. But you don't have to see that. Jalen, you just feel like everything that he shows you that you have not seen or that indicates what else might happen in his career, that's the biggest thing with the Rockets. Because I think he has a chance to really be special. I always used KJ Martin, who we talked about earlier, as an example. Houston fans have totally bought into the idea of what this team is doing, or at least the ones who go to games have, to where they're getting blown out. They're down 19 in the 7 minutes left. KJ Martin will do a chin up dunk, or in the Alpi example, he'll make some no look pass, and the place will cheer like crazy. Oh, you cut the lead to 17. Because they get that so much of it is about what you're trying to build, and that they are building, and here's the plan. Rockets have done a good job of communicating the plan, and that they have one, and so on. Do people remain that understanding this year? Do people, or do they start wanting to see some more results in the win-loss column?
I think this is the year they probably need to take a little bit of a step up. Like they just can't be the worst team in basketball again. Like that's like it's pretty untenable as an organization for that to happen 3 years in a row. Like, you look at examples throughout NBA history. Usually when that happens, it's dark to say. That's kind of when heads roll, and you don't want to see that happen, right? Especially because we know some of these guys. These guys are really good people, right? Fun, likable. You don't want to see that happen. So I think on some level they do need to be better than where they were last year. They don't need to be gangbusters. They don't need to be a playing team, but can they win 30 games? Can they win 27 games? 27 games? Like it's 7 more than where they were last year. I think that's a reasonable expectation for them.
Even that's going to be really tough. They're in some ways even younger. They're so young. Because they drafted 3 picks in the first round. They're going to play, or at least a couple of them. And if they don't play all three, then they're playing Dacian Knicks, who spent almost a whole year in the G League. And so they're incredibly young, but that's the plan. That's what they want to be. It's good. And then there's two ways to look at the schedule, because it's absolutely brutal through Christmas. It's just ridiculous. Does it just beat them down so bad? Do they go off in another one of these long losing streaks that you're just feeling awful? Or do you slog through the best you can? Maybe you win some, maybe have some success, which would be a good sign of progress and development. And is it better to have a schedule this front-loaded to where you're going to lose early anyway? You're so young. Maybe you're better off playing the teams that are going to beat you when you would lose to anybody. And then when you're ready to do something, when you're ready to play a little better and maybe win some games, you have teams you can beat and a schedule that you can make work for you. It's going to be really key not to be demoralized by the way things are early.
Are you in a roundabout way suggesting that it's good that they're setting the bar low early?
Like, I don't know what they're setting it as. They're going to. I mean, I always say, well, I'm setting it. And I think they'll continue. Like, I do think they want to have more success, and they want to have a chance at that. They go on with the program, and they understood that. But you want to have some success. It's hard to lose this much. But you drafted 3 players in the first round. They do like Knicks a lot. He's almost like 2 years in a row having 4 first-round picks in their mind. Well, that's 8 guys. That's a lot of young people to have to play. And, okay, they're not going to play them all because I don't think they're going to play Washington and Knicks consistent minutes. Not both of them. But that's still 7 really young guys in a rotation. 7 first or second year players, all drafted as not all as teenagers, all as teenagers or 20 years old. So if you keep playing them all, there's very little reason to expect all of a sudden you're going to win a whole bunch of games. How do you get through those first 2 months and stay? I think Silas doesn't get a lot of credit for it, but they have improved individually a lot. You can look at guys and we can all point to things. He does this better. He's better at this. This is the way he's improved. Well, they haven't gotten beaten down by the losses as we have seen losing teams throughout history do, to where that gives them a chance to make the rebuild work. Does that keep happening in a third year the way that schedule is in the first 2 months?
Yeah. It's going to be a really, really fascinating year for the Rockets. Like, I think, like it always is. I think this is one of those years where it's like, this is probably the last year that fans will probably hold as much patience as you're describing, at the ones at the games, getting excited about, second round picks getting into the game and dunking. Like, I think this is probably the last year that they keep that patience and, maybe it turns a little ugly. I hope, at some point they turn things around, because again, I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it turn ugly. I don't. But for right now, they're playing with house money because they still have their first round picks. There's no real incentive for them to win right now. But again, I do think there is an incentive for them to get better right now. And all they have to do is just go out there and prove that they have something to root for. And that's just about the easiest thing you can do in the NBA. It's very easy to supply hope, right? Because hope is, it's very vague. You can use, different things. You can use wins. You can use plays. You can use stats. You can use a broad range of things to supply hope. And so that's going to be something that's going to be very achievable for the Rockets.
The line used over the years, going back to when I covered colleges 25 years ago. Hope is the oxygen of sports. It's why draft night, it's why National Signing Day, all of those things drive so much interest, because it's hope. The Rockets have done a really good job of providing that while losing so much, while starting over. And I hope people kind of understand that for at least one more year. If Jabari Smith starts the way Jalen Green started, will he be given, to whatever degree there was a benefit of the doubt? Jalen Green had a lot of people questioning him too, though. Did they mess up? There was that talk too, which was ridiculous that early. You don't, 19-year-olds progress at different pace. Jabari Smith might as well. But I hope, because he's the third year of a losing team, he's given as much leeway to develop at his pace as Jalen Green did, and as young people need. And then the next year, you just got to keep seeing progress. And what would be very good to see is if, when the schedule balances out, because as brutal as it is early, it does balance out, as schedules do, that you start to show the progress on the court. You don't have to look and see this guy's one-on-one defense, this guy's understanding of schemes. No, you can just see the scoreboard. Eventually, maybe that's where they reach that at some point during the year. If they can just keep with the program long enough for those improvements to translate a little bit on the scoreboard.
Yeah, and listen, like I was a Mobley over Green guy, and I never, at no point did I ever declare victory laps when Jalen was struggling, because it's so dumb to do that. And yet people do it every year. The Trae Young with the Luka year, like that people were declaring victory laps early that year. The Anthony Bennett and LaMelo Ball thing, like it just happens year after year, and I really hope that doesn't happen with Jabari. Even again, like I had Jabari solidly number 3 on my board. Some people have a number 1. I'm not gonna, clown on those people if Jabari comes out and struggles, because I still think like he has a decent case for number 1, right? And like I think it's one of those things where I'm gonna give it the entire season and then some of next year, because really it takes like 2, sometimes 3 years to really understand what a player is going to be in the NBA. So I just think it's really presumptuous to make those kind of declarations early.
Well, I think that when you were talking about they're fun to watch, in a lot of ways, I guess they're fun. Every team is, if you look hard. I think he's interesting. I think he's very interesting. For one thing, it's cool to see a guy come in that committed defensively. So and if he can be effective defensively, that could get him time if he needs it. Who knows? He also might, he just catch and shoot, play off other guys and knock down threes. It's not a bad way to start. He didn't show that in Las Vegas, but obviously you think he will. That's not a bad way to start. 19-year-old rookie. So I'm looking forward to seeing him as well. Especially, not as well, obviously. He'd be really good to watch develop.
Certainly. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Jonathan. Where can we follow you on social media and read your great work?
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm going to jump back in on Monday. I've been off for a while, so I'm looking forward to starting to our coverage get going again. As always, HoustonChronicle.com, and I put links always on Twitter. Actually, a lot of them are automated, but I also try to get more on Twitter. And that's just my name, Jonathan_Feigen is on Twitter. And thank you for inviting me to share that. But yeah, looking forward to Monday, starting to get back on it.
Absolutely. What was the podcast name again?
Well, the Texas Sports Nation podcast. I guess we'll start that up too. I haven't asked about that, but we'll start that up. We did them during the year on Tuesdays. And so I've been off for a while and traveling and so on. But now that we're in September, I guess it's time for that. It's not as long as this one.
No. Well, sometimes we tend to carry long, but it's fun. Who cares? It's basketball.
Right. That's how I feel.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on, Jonathan.
All right. Enjoyed it.